Hello, my name is Kristen Jaworski, and I will be providing an overview of both the test administration in terms of the physical classroom, as well as a general overview of test analysis. Thinking first about the classroom setup and, of course, honoring academic honesty, there was a study that was completed by Pomales Garcia et al. That looked at how far away could someone actually accurately capture numeric or alpha content. And through that study, this legibility field, which is in figure 1, was identified. Just approximately 8 foot is that radius. There is an additional radius that there could potentially be some view just past that 8 foot line, but it would require quite a head tilt that a proctor would be able to identify it. Thinking about a classroom size, both structurally as well as the number of students, this would influence how you would want to set up desks for a testing day. Traditionally, many of us are familiar with parallel rows, that very traditional lineup of desks and students. This particular publication included what I felt like were some very interesting setups for seats that really provoked me to think about how I would potentially set up a classroom. In figure 2, part A, this is look away. These are back-to-back desks that are positioned around the perimeter of the room. B, one of the more interesting, is inverted team. And so rather than a team circle looking at each other, these desks are all facing each other in the back. Again, that hard radius where there's that 30 degrees of potential looking would require students to move their head quite a bit. And again, the proctor would be able to identify any dishonest practices. Furthermore, in figure 2, you can see around the room 2 squares and concentric rectangles, all unique ways to consider how you might set up your classroom. On the day of the test, it's important to have previously disclosed any policies about what you could and could not bring in, as well as academic dishonesty policies for the institution and your classroom, as well as how it would impact scoring. In general, there's an agreement that prohibited items, especially in our current day of technology, must include electronics. They're able to capture images, record, transmit sounds, have previously recorded notes on screens. I mean, there's just so many options for electronics. In addition, there are micro recording devices that students could potentially be using to record exams and share them, especially if there are other times where the exam will be given to other classes. In addition, restricting the sources where someone could bring in notes. These would include facial tissue. Someone could write some notes inside of a tissue, bringing their own scratch paper, and even the inside of a mechanical pencil. That means for us as faculty, we need to think about providing a secure storage area, instructing students ahead of time to leave things in lockers so that when they come, there's not a great delay in finding places for all their students' personal belongings. And most importantly is to predefine a late policy. If you come in late, it's not only disruptive to the test environment, but walking around the classroom could also infringe on the honesty policy. Thinking about test day, what the desk might look like, we already went over prohibited items, so there's not much, but consistent with many standardized exams, so you may require identification to ensure that you have the right student taking the test and not somebody else sitting in the seat. A basic scientific calculator. There are calculators that do allow notes, etc., to be programmed in the behind the main screen. Letting students know that on the desk will be the scrap paper that is allowed. Maybe you make it a different color so that you are acutely aware of what's on each student's desk. And layered clothing. that anxiety is part of test taking. And so the air conditioning and heating don't always work as well. So keeping a student comfortable and functioning at their best is ideal. Special accommodations are required by law for people who have disability. And this is outlined by the Americans with Disabilities Act. There are some helpful resources online that I've included as reference here on this slide, but just a general overview of the most common items that could be requested for accommodation would be a large print exam book, some type of screen reading technology. This might come in play in our next slide when we talk about people who have English as a second language, someone to scribe for a Scantron bubble, maybe extended time for a variety of diagnoses or disabilities where they might need that. Any accessible teaching and learning station, regardless if it's a long-term disability or short-term. Maybe someone just broke their leg and they have some assistive devices. In addition, of course, we're healthcare providers thinking about emergent and urgent medication that could be required during the test. Cultural considerations are equally as important by faculty. This does not require a disability, but rather a cultural background or religious requirement that would need accommodation. Culturally, we can think of English as a second language or English language learners. They are projected to be 1 in 4 students by the end of this year. And so the majority of students are English speaking, but there is 25%, which is a growing number. What this might mean, you might need some translation of instructions, maybe providing bilingual dictionaries, maybe read aloud assistance. Remember, we're testing their aptitude and knowledge of content and not their ability to transcribe in English. Second, think about the physical requirements that are often required in multiple cultures. Modest garments, which may be a flowing robe, a head covering, things that would technically be on our prohibited list for classrooms. So make sure that you are not being culturally insensitive. If you are doing a simulation evaluation in addition to your written exam, you'll need to make sure that whatever protective equipment can also accommodate someone who potentially has a head covering or some other garment that's required for their culture and religion. And always think about body shape and size. Not all desks accommodate all people. Also different ethnic groups tend to have higher height, shorter height, and just making sure that you have facilities, whether it be a computer workstation or a desk that can accommodate people. And then thinking about religious rituals and events. As we know, there are periods of religious celebration that include fasting, church attendance, pilgrimage, and being aware of what those dates are, and ensure that you are doing your best effort to not schedule a test or some type of crucial appointment or test review during one of these times where you might have students absent and unable to participate due to their culture or religion. Thinking about analyzing test results. So this is the second part, right? We set up our classroom and we're setting up our students for success. Now, what do we do once we get the test results? Well, generally, descriptive statistics tend to be the first go-to for analyzing your test results. What are the mean, the median, the standard deviation? How are people in general in the whole classroom performing on your exam? But there's other areas of which you can analyze a test. There's difficulty index, knowing the proportion of test takers that actually answered the item correctly. And in that value, if you have an item that calculates below 0.3, the item is likely too hard, meaning too many people missed it. Over 0.7 might mean that it was too easy and the majority of people got it correct. There's also a point by serial index. It measures how well an item differentiates between high and low performers. This is based on the total correct and incorrect and the test score. The high values indicate that the item discriminates between students who knew the material rather than those who don't. The distractor analysis is new to me. There are evaluations that are required in a multiple choice. You generally add at least 2 distractors. These are correct answers, but they are not the best correct answer. And evaluating those in the post-test analysis are important. A distractor is considered non-functional if it's chosen by fewer than 5% of students, meaning that it didn't distract. It's not correct enough that anyone actually selected or utilized that choice, and therefore the answers should be rewritten to that question. And then the last few minutes, we're going to talk about reliability and validity of exams. So making sure that the test is scored similarly across different student groups, as well as actually testing what you intend it to test. So for reliability of each question, we talked a little bit already about obtaining a p-value or determining the item difficulty. What proportion of the students actually answered this correctly? It should be similar across your classes. Item discrimination, which is the point by serial correlation. Do we have a differentiation to high-performing students generally answer the similar questions correct, and low-performing students miss high-level questions? Also, the reliability of the overall exam. This can be determined by the KR20 or Cronbach's alpha. So the difference between the two of KR20 is dichotomous, which means there has to be a yes or no, or a right or wrong answer, where Cronbach's alpha can accommodate scales like the Likert scale and have other values except just 0 or 1. Looking a little bit more into the Kutter and Richardson, or the KR20, it measures internal reliability, again, for those right-wrong items, or where there's only a yes or a no in terms of correctness. It measures how consistent test items measure the single construct. And what's required to run this statistical analysis? Again, the set of items, you score them 0 or 1. So 0 would be correct and 1 would be incorrect, or vice versa. However, but you categorize your data in that way. The proportion of correct answers per item and the variance of total test scores is required. What does this produce? A coefficient value between 0 and 1. When the value is closer to 1, it means that you have high internal consistency. When the value is greater than 0.7, it's acceptable for most classrooms. So you want to go closer to that 1 value in your correlation result. A low KR20 may suggest that you have heterogeneous items. So they're testing multiple domains, there's inconsistency in the test construct, and there's poor item discrimination. Validity, content validity ensures that there's alignment with your objectives and the content intended for the exam. This is often done by creating a blueprint or a map of your questions, a matrix of your test before you even construct the test. You also can use subject matter experts, other faculty, to judge the clarity, relevance, and fairness of your exam. And post-exam, you can even get student comments, albeit not always the first thought, but getting feedback on your test, especially if there's any misalignment or they felt like there was a deviation from your instructional content. This would be helpful. Understanding if your exam measures the intended knowledge, skills that you want is very important. Likewise, if you have students receiving an A on an exam and they're performing poor in clinical, there is no correlation, right, with those the validity across constructs. Whereas you would expect your high-performing students to also be performing well in clinical. And criterion-related validity would be comparing to other external benchmarks. So your A students should be passing the NCLEX and other important exams. So there should be some consistency and validate your overall exam. And with that, we'll conclude, and here's a list of the references. Thank you so much.